Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Neeru Tandon from VSSG College, Kanpur. We are discussing paper on English language teaching. In this particular module, which is discussing the 4 language skill, we have taken up the first language skill known as listening. Let us talk something about language skills, all the 4 language skills. Language skill, what is it? It is the ability to comprehend receptive language and use expressive language to communicate. Now, languages are generally imparted and evaluated in terms of these 4 skills. That's why these 4 skills are very, very important, known commonly as LSRW. L stands for listening, S for speaking, R for reading, and W for writing. Listening and speaking skills are known as oracy, while reading and writing skills are known as literacy. And together, oracy and literacy, they form linguacy. These terms are common and easy to understand if you understand the importance of these language skills. Now, they are again divided into 2 segments like receptive skills and productive skills. When we say receptive skills, then listening and reading, these 2 skills are known as receptive skills. Why? Because there nobody else is required. You just understand something. There is no production from your level. So they are the receptive skills. They are the channels of receiving the information. By listening also you receive something, and by reading also you understand or receive something. The other 2, speaking and writing, they are the channels of sending the information, not receiving. So that's why they are known as productive skills. These 4 skills, as they are referred to, are interrelated, because using a language generally requires using more than one skill at a time. Now, students, they listen. They listen to the teacher, they use the target language, to a song, to one another in a pair activity. So, this is one way how they start learning the language. Then they speak. There comes pronunciation, practice, greetings, dialogue, creation, recitation of the songs, substitution drills, oral, speed reading, role play, so many. Then comes reading, where instructions are given, written grammar drills are there, cards for playing games, flashcards, or using the computers and the mobiles, they can have e-books, so that comes under reading section. Then writing, finally, that establishes you as popularly that you have command over the language, the literacy. We have fill in the blank sheets, sentences, make sentences, and writing the paragraphs, then the books, dialogues, general entry. So all these things just are under the writing skills. Now, to see how all these writing skills are together, and you can watch this video to see how this language teacher over here uses 4 skills activities in her classroom. Editors, please play this YouTube link for the viewers.
I do use it. I try to incorporate at least 2 of those skills in every single activity that I do. A good portion of them use all 4. One of the ones that I like quite a bit is I'll teach a grammar point, and they'll have the basic notes and a couple of examples, and then I have them put all their notes away, and they're given multicolored sticky notes, and each color represents a different part of the sentence. And so the kids, after going through their notes, reading them, and figuring out, getting good solid examples of how the grammar is used, then they will get up with them in groups, and with those sticky notes, the group will try to create their own examples and make sure that the colors are in the correct order.
Oh, okay.
So say it was for sentence order in particular, that's what I generally use it for. And then once they come up with their examples, they share it with the class. And every time that I do any type of presentation where they have to share, they're required to always introduce themselves, just from habit of doing presentations, as well as they're required to answer any questions, and the audience are required to ask questions in the target language about the example that they chose.
Right.
And that's, I find by the end of all of their groups going through, during the examples that people are giving, I'll see all the other students making changes to their examples, because they'll say, oh, I've made a mistake.
Yeah.
Now how do I fix it? And they'll fix it before they get up. So by the end, all of the examples are pretty much 100% correct.
Perfect. That sounds like a great activity. Lots of comprehension on it.
What I wasn't expecting.
Now, let us concentrate on this first skill known as listening. Listening is the most important communication skill. We probably spend more time using our listening skills than the other kind of skills. Like other skills, listening takes practice. It's not easy to listen, because real listening is not a passive process. It is an active process. Listening also requires complete attention, because just imagine in a class what happens, that so many students are there, the same thing, the same video is being played on, or the teacher is saying the same thing. Some they take it because they have done listening in the right way, and some they cannot retain it because the listening portion has been not done correctly. This skill has not developed till that time. So when people talk, it was said by Ernest Hemingway, when people talk, listen completely. Most people never listen. So that is the problem. So he wanted that people should develop the listening skill first. In the same way, it was also said that we have 2 ears and only 1 tongue, in order that we may hear more and speak less. Now, have you had any problems dealing with listening exercises? How much do you know about listening? Let's find out. Listening as a skill. It's first thing to take care that don't take it that it is a passive skill. You are not supposed to do anything in listening. No, it is an active skill. How? Listening is a prerequisite to other skills of language. If you want to be a good reader, if you want to be a good writer, if you want to be a good speaker, you should be a good listener first. The activity of listening is not an act of just recording the speaker's utterances and repeating them as a tape recorder as they are. It is a process of making observations, bringing out the meaning out of the spoken language. So listening involves, number 1, receiving the systematic sounds of the language. Second, processing and constructing sounds into words. Then, giving meaning to the words and getting meaning from the words received, also at this time, at this activity of listening. And finally, ability to interpret and comprehend the speaker's utterances. Now, learners cannot improve their listening comprehension of second language without practice. First of all, I had experienced in my class when first time a student comes in the class, and when we just communicate in English, most of the time we find blank faces. But after some time, those blank faces, they become receptive, and by the end of the term, they are in the position to respond also. So that is that they should be, we give them this silent period that at least they should listen. In our lives, the verbal messages are deciphered not only by the spoken words but also by the situation the speaker, and visual clues. That's why a student should be introduced to the listening activity within the context of the topic of a teaching unit. Yet, the four skills do not exist as separate entities within the language. To the contrary, all of these skills are interrelated. When students are in a conversation, they are not just speaking, but also listening. You cannot just keep on speaking that I am just using this one. You will have to listen in order to speak. So listening is always part of the language skills. When students listen to a lecture in a class, they may also take notes. So at that time they are writing also. So listening is also coordinated with other skills. At the same time, it is possible for students to be more competent in one skill than another. I may be a good listener, but not necessarily a good speaker. So let us know how to be an effective listener. Effective listening is the process of analyzing sounds, organizing them into recognizable patterns, interpreting the patterns and understanding the message by inferring the meaning. Many of the problems we experience with people in our daily lives are primarily attributable to ineffective listening or lack of listening. Do you agree with this? That language learning depends on listening? Second, when you listen to a conversation in English, you try to understand those words. Then listening to songs and radio programs in English are two of the best ways to learn the language, because those ways are not boring. You have otherwise interest also in the rhythm, in the music and other programs. Now, there is one term known as hearing. Now, what is the difference between listening and hearing? Are they same or are they different? If different, how different? According to the Elmhurst College Learning Center, listening and hearing are not the same. Hearing is the first stage of listening. Hearing occurs when our ears pick up sound waves which are then transported to our brain. This stage is our sense of hearing. Listening is a communication process, and to be successful is an active process. In other words, we must be an active participant in this communication process. In active listening, meaning and evaluation of a message must take place before a listener can respond to a speaker. Therefore, the listener is actively working while the speaker is talking. How can this happen? It is simple. Our thought speed is much faster than our speech speed. But be careful. Don't allow the thought speed to race into daydreaming. This habit will defeat our attempt to become an active listener. Now, how much do learners retain from the listening output? This is a learning pyramid that you can see that, and it is true for average student retention rate. 10% at the time of lecture and also at the time of reading. Then 20% when they go for audio-visual things. While they see, they establish a relationship between the object or whatever they are hearing. Then 30% at the time of demonstration, when they inherit it, and at the time when they see or feel that demonstration and hear, then the 30% they learn. 50% at discussion, 75% at practice doing, and 90% when they teach others regarding that particular thing. Now, language learners need to be a good listener. Why? To obtain information, to understand, for enjoying something like song, to learn, and finally to communicate. What are listening strategies? Because it is a skill, so some strategy should be there. How to listen? We say, okay, we should be effective listener. But how? What are the process? What are the strategies? How can we just have the effective listening practicality? These are the techniques or activities that contribute directly to the comprehension and recall of listening input. It can be classified by how the listener processes the input. These are two basic things, top down and bottom up, and metacognitive also. What is top down listening strategy? It refers to the use of background knowledge in understanding the meaning of the message. Now understand, what is the use of the background knowledge that you already know? When we listen something, we don't hear only those words. If you are listening about listening activity, at least you are aware of the language, you are aware of the words, you are aware of the complete structure of the sentence. So that is the background knowledge. So it refers to the use of background knowledge in understanding the meaning of the message. You can just decipher the meaning only when you have that particular background knowledge. You know what you are going to hear. So that is the top-down listening strategy. What is background knowledge? That consists of context, the situation and the topic and the context, whatever is coming, whatever we had already talked and what is going to come after that. When all these things are there, then it is top-down listening strategy. What is listening? Listen. That is, Larry King said, I remind myself every morning, nothing I say this day will teach me anything. So if I am going to learn, I must do it by listening. So learning depends on listening more than on speaking. Now, top-down listening strategy. What is it? It is listener-based. The listener taps into background knowledge of the topic, the situation or context, the type of text and the language. This background knowledge activates a set of expectations that help the listener to interpret what is heard and anticipate what will come next. So what are these strategies? Include listening for the main idea, then predicting also that what is going to come next, what is the meaning of this particular thing, to what process I can link, then drawing inferences out of it. We don't only listen, we don't only hear, we just draw some inferences. Okay, after just listening, we can have an idea. He spoke well, she spoke well, no, she is not clear, she is ambiguous. What are these things? These are just the inferences, or we can summarize whatever the speakers told us by listening only. Now, top-down listening strategies, they focus on content. Students, they can predict the content of listening activity beforehand. So the materials that can be used in top-down are prevalent. Teachers can use authentic information. When students listen to real-life story, it can increase their interest and make them think about main idea more seriously. Now, second one, that is bottom-up. They are text-based. The listener relies on the language in the message. What are the sounds? What are the words used? What is the grammar that creates meaning? So bottom-up strategy include listening for specific details, recognizing cognates, and recognizing word order patterns. So in this particular strategy, dictation and listening tests are also included. Like in fill in the blanks activity, it can increase students' awareness of forms. However, bottom-up strategy doesn't mean that it excludes all authentic things. When we need deep concentration on details, we use this activity. Suppose for weather forecast, phone number, advertisement having implied meaning, they need a special focus on details to understand. Like tongue twisters, they can be a good exercise for students to notice subtle differences in various English forms and pronunciation. So successful listening depends on the ability to combine top-down and bottom-up processing. Activities which work separately should help students to combine top-down and bottom-up processes to become more effective listeners in real life or longer classroom listening. Now, there are metacognitive listening strategies as well. What is metacognitive? In general, the word metacognitive is thinking about thinking. More specifically, like Taylor said in 1999, he defines metacognition as, I quote, an appreciation of what one already knows, together with a correct apprehension of the learning task and what knowledge and skills it requires, combined with the agility to make correct inferences about how to apply one's strategic knowledge to a particular situation and to do so in a very good way, unquote. Now, metacognitive listening strategies include used to plan, monitor and evaluate listening. They plan deciding which listening strategy will serve best in particular situation. They monitor their comprehension and the effectiveness of the selected strategies. They evaluate by determining whether they have achieved their listening comprehension goals or not. Tips for helping our students become active listeners. Number 1, activate your students' prior knowledge before any listening activity in order to predict or anticipate content. You are a good teacher if you are successful in activating your students' prior knowledge. Then, assess your students' background knowledge on the topic and linguistic content of the text. If students are there to complete a written task just after listening, please take care that they should read first, then listen and then write. Now, it happens in the reverse order. Usually in the classroom, the teacher comes in the classroom, says something, discusses something, then he says, okay, open your books, read it, and then afterwards, this is the portion, then you start writing it. It should not be. Many researchers of ELT, they have established this fact that when in the classroom, teacher gives them a piece for reading and then he discusses that very chapter with them and then students are supposed to write, the results are always better. Use questions to focus students' attention on the elements of the text crucial to comprehension of the whole. When they have questions in front of them, then they pay particular attention towards the answer of those questions and then they listen more attentively. Use predicting to encourage students to monitor their comprehension as they listen. Remind students to review what they are hearing to see if it makes sense in the context of their prior knowledge and what they already know of the topic or events or the passage. It is very, very useful if you use visual aids such as maps, diagrams, pictures, videos, images to contextualize the input that is already there. So hearing or listening becomes more and more influential. Now there is a term, real listening. What is real listening? It has 3 basic steps. First is hearing, second is understanding, and the third is judging. Without even one step, the listening is not the real listening. One should hear, of course. Hearing means listening enough to catch the sound or what the speaker is saying. For example, say you were listening to a report on zebras and the speaker mentioned that no two are alike. If you can repeat the fact, then you have heard what has been said. Now the next part of the listening happens when you take what you have heard and understand it in your own way. It means you are ready to analyze. You are ready to reproduce. Let's go back to that report on zebras. When you hear that no two are alike, think about what they might mean. You might think maybe this means that the pattern of stripes is different for each zebra. In the previous level, at the hearing level, only you could get that two zebras are not alike. In whatever way, there are many ways they may be different. Now you just think about it, how they are different. If they are not alike, means their stripes are different, their nature is different, their pattern of behavior is different. So you have come to this conclusion that the speaker is speaking, what you heard is that their stripes are different. So this is the understanding portion. And then judging. After you are sure that you have understood what the speaker has said, think about whether it makes sense. Do you believe what you have heard? You might think, how could the stripes be different for every zebra? But then again, the fingerprints of human beings are different. So I think this seems believable. I can believe this. Active listening process again have 5 steps. Hearing, filtering. Everything what I hear, we don't retain that. We filter it. Automatically, the things in which we have interest, the things what we understood, we filter them and retain some portion and some portion goes away. So that the second active listening has filtering also, and then comprehending, then remembering, and finally responding. Either you say this much, this is also the response, and that shows the active listening. Yes, I am listening and I am understanding. Now types of listening are also there. Discriminative listening, comprehension listening, and evaluative listening. Discriminative listening involves identifying the difference between various sounds. It also enables one to differentiate between familiar and unfamiliar language. Comprehension listening involves attaching meaning to what is being listened to. It may also include comprehending the non-verbal messages being conveyed by the speaker at the time of speaking. You are listening, not listening only to the words. You are listening to the non-verbal gestures also, because you are interpreting them. Evaluative listening involves evaluating and analyzing the message being received. It involves judging the acceptability of what is said depending on how logical one finds it to be. Now there is attentive listening. It involves paying attention to the words as well as towards the meaning whatever is being spoken. Pretense listening. It involves more hearing than listening. You are not ready to understand, you are not interested in understanding, you are just pretending, okay, I am listening. It means pretending through facial expressions that one is listening when actually one is not. It's very common in the classroom. Out of 60 students, more than 30 are pretending that they are listening. Yes ma'am, yes ma'am. But the moment you just ask them to repeat or to reproduce, most of them are lost because they were not attentively listening. Rather, they were doing the work of pretense listening. Now, selective listening. It involves selecting the desired part of the message and ignoring the undesired part of the message. How? Suppose we watch a movie. What happens? We have the remote in our hands and we just fast forward the portion that we don't want to listen. We just avoid it. Or we are listening the radio, so we change the channel, or on the TV also. So that is the selective listening. Whatever we want to listen, we just listen that, and rest of the things we avoid. So the listener is also selective, what to listen, what not to listen. Intuitive listening. It means listening through the intuitive mind by silencing the other forms of internal dialogues going on simultaneously. The best example of intuitive listening is when you go on your own to listen to a sermon, to a religious preaching. There, for that particular time, you just forget your worries. You just forget all your chores, household chores, work, to do, and finally you wish, you want that you should listen something related with your religion, something, the advice that you need from your preacher or the guru. At that time, that is intuitive listening. You just listen to Gita, you just listen to Ramayana, you just listen to Quran or particular portion of religion and leave everything aside. That is intuitive listening. Now listen, if you just explain this one word, listen. L stands for look interested, get interested. I for involve yourself by responding. S stay on target. T test your understanding. E evaluate the message. And N neutralize your feelings. When you do all these things, then you really listen something. I like to listen. I have learned a great deal by listening carefully, but most people never listen. This is said by Ernest Hemingway, the famous writer. In the same way, Jiddu Krishnamurti said, I quote, "So when you are listening to somebody completely and attentively, then you are listening not only to the words, but also to the feeling of what is being conveyed, to the whole of it, not part of it." Unquote. Now it is very important to understand the barriers to listen. Why some people listen properly, why others cannot or do not. So there are certain barriers. Equate with hearing. They cannot differentiate between learning out of listening and hearing. Uninteresting topics are there. Speaker's delivery, that is also, if he is not a good presenter, then that is also a barrier to listening. Nobody wants to listen. Why it happens that somebody is speaking on the stage and the audience is making sound, they are talking to each other, nobody is interested in listening. The moment a good speaker comes over there, they start listening. There is a pin drop silence. So this is the external factors, that is speaker's delivery is there, and that is good. Other external distractions are there. Then also, like if something interesting is going on, so they are more interested in watching that particular thing. If they are hungry and the food is there ready, they are no more ready to listen. They want to go there. So that is external barrier. Mentally preparing response, then listening for facts, personal concerns, personal biases, language, culture differences. Suppose somebody's accent is like that people cannot follow it, so they stop listening also. Faking attention. They just show, they just pretend, but they don't want to give them attention. So these are the barriers of active listening. Now you can use the technology also for listening, like radio, TV, CD, computers, call, mall, the internet, electronic dictionary, email, blogs and audio cassettes, PowerPoint presentations, videos, DVDs, and most important, language lab. It is said every good conversation starts with good listening. So listening process, which is complex, multi-step process by which spoken language is converted into meaning in the mind, have identified 3 steps in the process of listening, which are receiving, attending and assigning meaning. That's all for listening skill. Keep listening, be active listener, and just hone your language skills for be a good communicator. Thank you for visiting EPG Pathshala.